Welcome back to Insidious Mysteries with Blair.
And Sydney.
Today's case is about the Black Dahlia.
Today's disclaimer: severe torture, murder, and talk about child molestation. If this isn't something you want to hear about, then click off and we will see you in the next case. Childhood. Elizabeth Short was born 29th of July 1924 in the Hyde Park section of Boston, Massachusetts. She was the third of 5 daughters of Cleo Alvin Short Jr. and his wife Phoebe May Sawyer. Her sisters were Virginia May West, who was born in 1920, Dorothea Scosier, who was born in 1922, Elnora Chalmers, who was born in 1925, and Muriel, who was born in 1929. Her father, Cleo Alvin, was a United States Navy sailor. He was born in 1885 in Gloucester to Cleo Alvin Short Sr. and Alice Ada Billups. Her mother, Phoebe May, was a housewife who was born in 1897 in Millbridge, child of Charles Turner Sawyer and Ella Nora Brown. Elizabeth's parents got married in Portland, Cumberland in 1918. The Short family briefly relocated to Portland, Maine in 1927, before settling in Medford, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston. The same year, Short's father built a miniature golf course until he lost most of his savings in the 1929's stock market. In 1930, his car was found abandoned on the Charlestown Bridge, and it was assumed he jumped into the river. Believing her husband was deceased, Elizabeth's mother began working as a bookkeeper to support the family. Troubled by bronchitis and severe asthma attacks, Elizabeth underwent lung surgery at 15, after which doctors suggested she temporarily relocate to a milder climate to prevent further problems. Her mother sent her to spend winters with family and friends in Miami, Florida for the next 3 years. Elizabeth dropped out of Medford High School during her sophomore year. In late 1942, Elizabeth's mother received a letter of apology from her presumed deceased husband, which revealed he was in fact alive and had started a new life in California. In December, at age 18 in 1942, Elizabeth relocated to California to live with her father, whom she had not seen since age 6. At the time, he was working at a nearby Mare Island naval shipyard on San Francisco Bay. Arguments between Elizabeth and her father led her to moving out in January 1943. Elizabeth took a job at the base exchange at Camp Cook, briefly living with U.S. Army Air Force sergeant who reportedly abused her. She left Lompoc in mid-1943 and moved to Santa Barbara, where she was arrested on September 23, 1943, for drinking at a local bar while underage. Juvenile authorities sent her back to Massachusetts, but she returned instead to Florida, making only occasional visits to her family in Boston. While in Florida, Elizabeth met Major Matthew Michael Jordan Jr., a decorated Army Air Force officer of the 2nd Air Commando Group, who was training for deployment to Southeast Asian Theatre of World War II. Elizabeth later told friends that Gordon had written to propose marriage while he was recovering from injuries from a plane crash in India. She accepted his offer, but Gordon died in a second crash on August 10, 1945. Elizabeth's sister, Dorothea, also served in World War II and was assigned to decode Japanese messages. In July 1946, Elizabeth relocated to Los Angeles to visit Army Air Force Lieutenant Joseph Gordon Ficken, an acquaintance from Florida who was stationed at the Naval Reserve Air Base in Long Beach. Elizabeth spent her last moments of her life in Southern California, mostly in Los Angeles area. Shortly before her death, she had been working as a waitress and rented a room behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard.
On January 9th, 1947, Elizabeth returned to her home in Los Angeles after a brief trip to San Diego with Robert Brackett's Red Manley, a 25-year-old married salesman she had been dating. Manley stated that he dropped Short off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, and that Short was to meet her sister, who was visiting from Boston. That afternoon, by some accounts, staff of the Biltmore recalled having seen Short using the lobby telephone. Shortly after, she was allegedly seen by the patrons of the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge at 754 South Olive Street, approximately 600 miles away from Biltmore. On the morning of January 15th, 1947, Short's naked body, severed into two pieces, was found in a vacant lot on the west side of South Norton Avenue, midway between Cosum Street and West 39th Street, in the neighbourhood of Leimert Park. At the time, Leimert Park was largely underdeveloped. Short's severely mutilated body was completely severed at the waist and drained of blood, leaving her skin pale white. Medical examiners determined that she had been dead for around 10 hours prior to the discovery, leaving her time of death either sometime during the evening of January 14th or the early hours of the morning of January 15th. The body had apparently been washed by the killer. Short's face had been slashed from corners of her mouth to her ears, creating an effect known as the Glasgow smile. She had several cuts on her thigh and breasts, where entire portions of flesh had been sliced away. The lower half of her body was positioned a foot away from her upper. Her intestines had been tucked neatly beneath her buttocks. The corpse had been posed with her hands over her head, her elbows bent at right angles, and her legs spread apart. Los Angeles Herald-Express reporter Aggie Underwood was among the first to arrive and took several photos of the corpse and crime scene. Near the body, detectives located a heel print on the ground among the tire tracks, and a cement sack containing watery blood was also found nearby. An autopsy of Short's body was performed on January 16th, 1947, by Frederick Newbar, the Los Angeles County Coroner. Newbar's autopsy reported that Short was 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighed 115 pounds, and had light blue eyes and brown hair, and had badly decayed teeth. There were ligature marks on her ankles, wrists, and neck, and an irregular laceration with superficial tissue loss on her right breast. Newbar also noted superficial lacerations on the right forearm, left upper arm, and lower left side of the chest. The body had been cut completely in half by a technique taught in the 1930s. The lower half of her body had been removed by transecting the lumbar spine between the second and third lumbar vertebrae, thus severing the intestine. Newbar's reported noted very little bruising along the incision line, suggesting it had been performed after death. The lacerations on each side of the face, which extended from the corners of the lips, were measured at 3 inches on the right side of the face and 2.5 inches on the left. The skull was not fractured, but there was bruising noted on the front and the right side of the scalp, with a small amount of bleeding on the right side consistent with blows to the head. The cause of death was determined to be hemorrhaging from the first lacerations to her face in the shock from the blows to the head. Newbar noted that Short's anal canal was dilated at 45 millimeters, suggesting that she might have been raped. Samples were taken from her body, testing for sperm, but the results came back negative. It was only after preying as much as personal information as they could from Phoebe that the reporters revealed that her daughter had in fact been murdered. The Examiner also offered to pay Phoebe's airfare and accommodation if she would travel to Los Angeles to help with the police investigation. That was yet another play, since the newspaper kept her away from the police and other reporters to protect its scoop.
Elizabeth is interred at the Mountain View Cemetery in Oakland. Her younger sister had grown up and married. Her mother, however, moved to Oakland to be near her daughter's grave. She finally returned to the East Coast in the 1970s, where she lived into her 90s and died in 1992. Elizabeth's life and death have been the basis of numerous books, television shows and films, both fictionalised and non-fiction. Elizabeth was also portrayed in heavy fictionalised accounts by Lucy Arness in the 1975 television film Who is a Black Dahlia by Jessica Nelson in Season 4, Episode 13 of Hunter. Also in the series American Horror Story in 2011, featuring Elizabeth in the plotline of the episode Spooky Little Girl, and again in 2018 with Return to Murder House. That's all for today's case. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more from us, and we will be back next week with another. Bye for now!